I had performed the Brahms F minor sonata a number of times and actually played it in New York at Carnegie Hall. Although you would think that that was the end of an exploration, it seemed to me just the beginning. It's such an incredible piece that I felt I needed more time to explore what it has to offer, and I decided to put together a recital program based on the Brahms F minor sonata. I've always thought the music of Brahms, especially in that very Germanic period of his life, it balances so well by the music of the Impressionists. There's a real give and take, that he has a few ideas that he might share with somebody like Ravel or somebody like Debussy, but for the most part, the two strategies are so different, they kind of build one upon the other. Usually when I put together a recital program, I think of it as how would I put together a dinner menu. I don't want you to feel so full from the first dish that you don't have any space for the rest. At the same time, I want to whet your appetite. You start off with a little taste of Debussy, and then maybe a nice cleansing salad of Ravel, and then a slightly richer soup of Scriabin, and then you finish with your beef Wellington Brahms at the end. Debussy's Children's Corner is probably one of the most famous pieces ever written for the piano, because every piano student past about the year 3 or 4 will have played either Golliwogg's Cakewalk or Dr. Gradus ad Parnassum, the first movement. It's really become a standard thing for you to learn as a student. So that raises the question, is it meant for children to be learning, or is it actually meant for adults to be looking at the world of children? If you had asked me that question when I was a child, I would have said it's meant for kids. And coming back to it as an adult, I find really this isn't meant for children at all. It's such deep music. Each one of these movements is a little gem. Debussy wrote the Children's Corner later in life. He finally had a daughter and decided to write something for her when she was about 3. The opening of this piece is really one of the most beautiful things ever written. Dr. Gradus ad Parnassum is mocking a book by the great Clementi, who wrote a book of etudes, of studies for young pianists called Gradus ad Parnassum, steps to Parnassus. So for all those kids who are tired of playing those exercises all day long, here's the same principle and exercise, but boy, a whole lot more beautiful. Even though Debussy was very inspired by the world of the child, and particularly by the world of his daughter, he was Debussy and he was writing at his level. Anybody can get something out of this piece, whether it's the child first learning it or the adult looking back at it. This piece was published in 1908, the last of the pieces in the group on this recital, even though it's the first one on the program. It really does build on everything that all the other composers have done, and also on everything that Debussy has done, and all the different abilities to combine sound and to just make incredible little visions of light just with a couple of notes. Ravel said at some point in his life, "I've only written one masterpiece, and unfortunately it's Bolero." Which I always find very depressing, because Ravel wrote so many incredible pieces. I'm sorry he didn't get to feel that honor in his lifetime. The RAVEL Sonatine. It's such a special piece, even though it's kind of a short, compact miniature. It's very Germanic in its form. Ravel very much uses the same bases for the large scale that Brahms does, but he does it in such a different way, such a different language. The second movement, the minuet, you can just see Degas paintings of dancers. I can feel myself rising out of the keyboard, the way a ballet dancer sort of does. Even though the second movement is a minuet, Ravel has such a deep understanding of rhythm and cross rhythms and of colors. You really feel he's actually writing for an orchestra, and he somehow fits it all into the piano. And this ties in very well also with the way the Brahms Sonata is really like a large symphony put onto the piano. I think Scriabin, of all the pianist composers on this program, is probably the most out there as a person. He was really interested in lights and kaleidoscopes and things like that, and you can really see the paintbrush working in his sound. This particular sonata uses one technique which I find so beautiful and so fascinating, which is to have the theme actually be in the center of the sound. And when I was first looking at the music to this piece, I was maybe 18, 19 years old. And I'm searching, and it's quite a mess on this page. It's all black. And then it says, Ben marcato il canto, mark well the theme. I realized that the theme kind of went all around in the center of everything else. And I think that concept of voicing, and particularly of voicing in the middle, is something that he really learned from the Impressionists. It makes perfect sense that he wrote this sonata while living in Paris amongst the Impressionists, but he has the same kind of richness that you then hear in the Germanic music, in Brahms. I like that link, that connection. The Brahms Sonata is Opus 5. It's hardly the fifth work that Brahms wrote, but it's the fifth work he felt ready to present to the public. Here was a man who was really trying to come up with his voice and finally felt that he'd done it. How many of us can say we came up with our voice at age 20? In the context of Western classical music, this particular sonata falls at a really important place. After Beethoven, everybody was trying to figure out, how do I go on? What do I do? For Brahms, that was a very difficult and long struggle. He was clearly haunted by some Beethovenian demons. The fourth movement of the sonata is actually called Rückblick, so a glance back. And it's a look back, in certain ways, at an earlier movement in the sonata. But in a much broader context, I think it's also a look back at Beethoven, because it includes the fate motive, which is the rhythm from the Fifth Symphony, the ta-ta-ta-tam, ta-ta-ta-tam. Slightly different rhythm than in Beethoven's Fifth, but everybody would have recognized what Brahms meant by that. Quietly, hauntingly, persistently, sort of mocking the composer who's trying to work his way and figure out what to do. So Brahms takes this ta-ta-ta-tam and he builds it up to a big fortissimo and just gets bigger and bigger, and he's clearly being haunted and attacked by this rhythm. And then he kind of dissolves into this crazy ninth chord, very jazzy, impressionistic sounding thing, which for 1853 would have just been shocking. You can almost see Chopin's influence and the future of Ravel and Debussy in just that little snippet. Even though this was written as a piano sonata, he wrote it with a lot of symphonic ideas in mind. And so what he's able to do is extract from the piano sounds almost as rich, almost as grand as a complete symphony orchestra. This piece is so huge. It's a journey you have to undertake. I think whether you're playing it or listening to it, you're going to start in one place, and by the time you've gotten to the end, you will be completely transformed. I think that's what makes great art. You're never the same afterwards as you were before.